Chapter 14. Someone in the Basement. The basement was huge, a low-ceilinged room that stretched out into shadowy darkness ahead of her and to the left. It wasn't an empty darkness. She could see what appeared to be low hills lurking in the shadows. Another light bulb shone dimly in a far corner. Did that mean someone was down here? One of the workmen, maybe? She thought of calling out, "Anyone here?" But there was something still and heavy about the silence that made her afraid to break it. She would just look around a little, quietly, and then she would climb up the stairs and leave. The air had a smell like the damp, earthy underside of rocks. Once her eyes had adjusted to the dimness, she saw that the hills were piles of furniture, a great crammed-together mass with just a narrow passage winding through it. Tables lay with their feet in the air, and between the feet were other tables, and dining-room chairs, and stools, and chests of drawers, and on top of the chests were more chairs, upside down, making a nest for footstools, and mirrors, and lamp bases, and unidentifiable things covered in sheets. Far back against the wall stood four-poster beds, some piled with 3 or 4 mattresses, and great looming wardrobes with mirrored doors. All of it had turned the same dirt-gray color because of the dust that coated it. Cobwebs drifted in long strings from the ceiling, brushing Nicky's face as she walked by. Otis squirmed in her arms. She followed the passage that twisted through all this. It was like walking down a tunnel almost. Because the furniture was stacked shoulder high, she moved toward the light. She heard a scrape and then a rustling sound. She stopped, held her breath, and listened. Was someone in here? She bent down and peered through the forest of furniture legs, but it was too dark to see. Something stirred over by the wall. Wood knocked against wood, a head rose from the jumble of furniture, and a voice spoke. "Pa?" it said. "Is that you?" "No," said Nicky. Her heart jumped, but curiosity kept her from running away. The head ducked down again. There was more scraping and rustling, and then someone crawled out from beneath a big table. A boy with cobwebs in his hair. "I know who you are," the boy said. He held his hands cupped together as if protecting something. "The old guy's granddaughter." "Great-granddaughter," said Nicky. "And who's that?" He nodded at Otis, who was squirming in Nicky's arms. "It's Otis," she said. "I'm taking care of him for somebody. Who are you?" She couldn't see the boy's face. The light was behind him. It cast his huge, blurry shadow onto a cabinet that leaned against the headboard of a bed. "Grover," said the boy. "My pa's fixing your pipes." "But what are you doing down here?" The boy sprang toward her all of a sudden. "Lying in wait," he cried, "for unwary creatures to fall into my trap." Nicky shrieked and then instantly regretted it, because he laughed to see that he'd scared her. "I already caught one unwary creature," he said. He held up his clasped hands. "It's a prisoner now, awaiting its fate." "What is it?" He stepped toward her and she stepped back. She couldn't help it. He might have had a spider in his hands, and he might be the kind of boy who would suddenly throw it at you. "I'll show you if you're brave enough to look," he said. He stretched out his hands and opened them so she could see what he held. It was not a spider. She couldn't tell what it was. Something small and pinkish. Otis strained forward, sniffing madly. She put her hand around his muzzle. "An infant mouse!" the boy cried. "There's 8 of them in a nest down there by the heating pipe." "Let me see," said Nicky. "Hold it in the light." He did. It had hairless, almost transparent skin, tiny twitching paws, and little blind eyes. It was about as big as a quarter. "Why did you steal it?" she asked him. "I need it," he said, "for my snake." "What?" "For my snake to eat." She looked up at the boy's face, which was framed in blonde curly hair. His ears stuck out. She knew suddenly who he was. "You don't believe me?" he said. "I believe you," she said, "but I don't like it." She turned around and started back the way she'd come. He followed her up the stairs and out of the basement. She set Otis down, and he sniffed Grover's shoes with great interest. "Where'd the dog come from?" Grover asked. "I'm just taking care of him for a little while," Nicky said. "He's a secret. Don't tell about him, all right?" Grover tilted his head upward and yelled, "Hey, everybody! Guess what? There's a—" Nicky shouted, "Stop it!" He laughed. "I'll keep you secret," he said. "Now you owe me a favor." "Are you really going to give that baby mouse to a snake?" Nicky asked. "Yep." Grover stretched his mouth into a wicked grin. "Because I'm mean and evil." He gave a maniac laugh. "Worse than—" He lowered his voice to a gruesome whisper. "Hoyt McCoy. Have you heard of him?" Nicky nodded, feeling a lurch in her stomach. "Well, I'm much worse than him," Grover said. "You have spiderwebs in your hair," said Nicky. She turned and walked away from him, through the back door and into the house. What terrible luck, she thought. A boy right here, where she could get to know him. And he turns out to be the boy with the snakes. And on top of that, a kidnapper and murderer of baby mice. She couldn't possibly fall in love with someone like him. She went upstairs again, planning to read until Crystal got home. She switched on the lamp and picked up her great-grandfather's notebook. On the floor beside her, Otis went to sleep and dreamed, making soft little whip-whip noises and fluttering his paws. Nicky read, 1, 2. Legs very weak and painful. Spent the day reading the scientific journals. Intrigued by this notion of extra dimensions, other worlds right next to ours. Had a chat with M, but of course can't understand a word. What might that mean? She knew about 3 dimensions, up, down, and sideways. What were extra dimensions? Who was M? She read on. 1-4. Extraordinary experience last night. Went into the back bedroom to look for the scissors. Thought I saw someone in there, over by the bed. Dark-haired figure. Transparent swirl of skirt. Dreadful feeling of sorrow hit me like a wave. Had to grab the doorknob. Almost fell. Figure faded, vanished. Maybe something wrong with my eyes. Or heart. He was 93 when he died. Maybe he was losing his mind a little bit, thinking he was seeing ghosts. She read on. 1:19. Brenda B. came by today, all worked up, trying to figure out what Althea is saying, and what to do about it. Kept talking about how she's studying every holy book she can get her hands on, aiming to understand God's word. I quoted St. Augustine to her. If you understand it, it isn't God. Gave her a cup of chamomile tea. That was interesting. But then came another mystifying one. 1:30. String theory. M theory? 11 dimensions. Gravity waves. Alternate universes? Possible leakage between one universe and another. Amazing stuff. M says his research is very promising. Maybe he thought he'd slipped into an alternate universe in the back bedroom and seen a ghost somehow. Which one was the back bedroom, anyhow? Nicky left the sleeping Otis and went down to the 2nd floor, hoping to catch sight of the ghost herself. It was clear which one was the back bedroom. Its window looked out over the backyard. She saw no ghost in that room. But through the window she saw Grover, who was probably waiting for his father. He was walking along the low wall that bordered the concrete terrace, and crouching down every now and then to study the ground, maybe looking for more creatures to capture. She watched him for a minute. He was definitely good-looking. She liked the springy way he moved, and his floppy hair more or less covered up his sticking-out ears. But she couldn't fall in love with him, of course, because of the snakes and the baby mouse, but she decided to go down and talk to him again anyhow. When Grover saw her come outside, he beckoned to her, and she went over to him. "Listen," he said in an urgent whisper. I want to show you something amazing. No human eye has ever lit on it before. Nicky was wary. Is it about snakes? No, no, said Grover. I told you, no one has ever seen this. Not even you? Not even me. Well, what is it? Nicky said. Grover reached into his lunch bag and brought out a small green apple. I've seen apples before, Nicky said. Yeah, but watch this. Grover took out his pocket knife, pulled the blade out, and sliced the apple in half across the middle. He pointed to the inside, the white flesh oozing juice, the 5 little seeds in a star shape. I've seen that, too, said Nicky. No, you haven't, Grover said. No one has. Not a single person has ever seen the inside of this apple until now. It is a completely new sight to the human eye. He took a big bite out of one half of the apple and stood there chewing, with a wide, satisfied smile across his face. Oh, you think you're so clever, Nicky said. She grabbed the other half of the apple out of his hand. She was annoyed at being tricked, but she couldn't help smiling a little too. What he'd said was true, after all. An idea popped into her head. I know something you've never seen before, she said. No human eye has ever seen it or ever will see it. That doesn't make sense, said Grover, munching on his apple. Yes, it does. I'll show you. But if you show me, then I will have seen it. No, you won't, said Nicky. Just wait here. I'll go get it. She ran inside, went to her bedroom, and came back out clutching a piece of paper. She held it out. Do you know what this is? Grover peered at it. It's some fake monster out of a science fiction movie, he said. Nope, said Nicky. It's a dust mite. In this picture, it's magnified many, many zillion times. You will never see it in real life, because it's smaller than the eye can see. Ha, said Grover. He looked up at her and quirked an eyebrow. Where'd you get it? I got it out of a magazine. I like strange, interesting things. You don't like snakes, though, Grover said. Probably you're afraid of them. I am not. You'd never want to see a snake eat a mouse. Maybe I would. As soon as she said this, she realized it was true. It would be a horrible thing to see, but interesting. And it might help her decide if there was something evil about this boy or not. Really? Grover looked surprised. Really? I don't believe you. You're just saying that to sound big. This was somewhat true, but Nicky wasn't going to admit it. Just tell me when, she said. I'll come and see it. So he said she should come by the next day about 3:30, and he told her how to get to his house. Just in time, she remembered not to say she already knew where he lived. Crystal got back around 5. She came in the front door, her cheeks red with cold and her eyes sparkling, talking and talking about the lovely scenery in the surrounding hills. This really is a gorgeous area, she said. I had such a wonderful time. Good, said Nicky, not really listening. And Len told me some interesting things about Yonwood, Crystal said. A woman here has had some kind of religious experience, apparently. People think it means Yonwood is a sort of chosen place, and they'll be safe even if there's a war. Nicky started paying closer attention. Does Len think that? He doesn't know what to think, Crystal said, flinging her coat on a chair. He was in school with this prophet person. She was a shy, bookish little girl, he said. Not the type to grab for attention. So he thinks maybe what happened to her was real. Have you heard anything about it? A little, Nicky said, trying to look uninterested. Tomorrow, said Crystal, I'm going to have my hair done at the local beauty shop. I'll probably come out looking like a dandelion, but at least that'll be better than this mess. She swatted at her bangs. Good idea, said Nicky, though she thought Crystal looked fine as she was. After that, Crystal went on, I'm going into Asheville for some shopping. I don't suppose you want to come? No, Nicky said. I don't want to come. What are you gonna do?
Oh, nothing much,
Nicky said. She didn't think it was a good idea to mention snakes or mice. You're such a good girl, Crystal said. All this time on your own, and you never get bored or get into trouble. It's amazing. Nicky just smiled.